everyone. Welcome back to Which is the Moon, Season 9, Week 2. This week we are coming to talk to you about finding and connecting with your deity. Now, this topic may not pertain to everyone who practices the craft because there are a lot of people that don't feel that the craft is a religion. For me, it is a religion. I define religion as the factors that rule your day-to-day actions in life, whether you believe in a god, don't believe in a god, believe in a goddess, whatever your views on that are. Some people simply see the craft as a way of life, and to me your way of life is your religion. Certain political views could be considered a religion because people hold to those religiously speaking. For me, the craft is a religion because it is my way of life, and I do have a recognized deity. Now, I'm going to share a little bit of my personal opinion today. So it is my opinion. This is my view on things, and it may be vastly different from yours, and it may be vastly different from other people's, but this is how I view the world. So today you're getting Natalie's worldview. I believe that there is one female energy that is a goddess. I believe that there is one male energy that is a god. I believe you must have male and female to have life. It's that way for almost all of life on the planet. Even trees and plants are male, female in many ways. However, it's not the way for all life, but I believe that they make themselves known to us in various different manifestations with many different characteristics, just as there are many sides to your personality and many sides to my personality. I'm never the same Natalie on any given day. I believe that that's true for the god and goddess as well. I think that they present themselves to us in the ways that they need to be known for us. And although I don't like goddess shopping or god shopping, so to speak, today I'm working with this god and tomorrow I'm working with this god. For some people that may work, and it could be that they are in the process of exploring which aspect of the Lord and Lady they need to have in their lives at that moment. So I try not to judge people because, this is a very individualistic path, and, everybody's at a different place on this path. So I personally don't do that. I tend to be kind of a loyal person in terms of I stick with people and I stick with things until they give me a reason not to. Now, that being said, I want to talk a little bit about how to know when you're being called by a certain god or goddess aspect. Some people have these deep spiritual experiences, oh, Hecate came to me in a dream and it was so powerful and it was like being slapped in the face. And I always thought that that's how it should be, but for me it was not like that. And I would watch these people's videos and they would say, if you didn't have this strong spiritual, connection immediately, and you didn't have this powerful experience, then, you're not being called by this god or this goddess or whatever. And I don't believe that that's true. Because once again, I believe that the Lord and the Lady present themselves to you in the manner and the way and the form in which it is best for you at that moment in time. So, for me, it was vastly different. I realized in retrospection that the goddess Morrigan, with whom I work, with whom I subject myself, so to speak, that's not really proper way to state it, but for lack of a better term, she is the goddess who called to me, with whom I feel a deep and spiritual connection. But it wasn't an all instantaneous sudden blam, there's, she's calling me. It was much more subtle than that to me, and I realized it had been a lifelong calling. And it was after going back and looking at various things in my life and events in my life that I started to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And I realized that she'd been kind of smacking me all along, and I just hadn't realized it for whatever reason. So here was my experience. Starting at a very, very, very young age, I'd always been very drawn to witchcraft and witches and Celtic mythology in particular. My great-grandmother is Irish, but my other great-grandmother on my father's side was Welsh and Scottish, and his mother was French. So my grandmother was French. My other grandmother was half Dutch, half Irish. So it was a mix. I have some Cherokee blood. I have French blood. I have, Scottish blood. I have Welsh blood. I have Dutch blood, as I mentioned. So, I mean, it's kind of a mix. So there's not one specific thing, but I've always been very drawn to the Celtic side of my family. And I know that there's always been a big draw for me. When I hear Julian pipes, it does something to me that I just can't explain. And it's always been that way for me. So that was one big thing there. I also realized, looking back, that my interest in witches and magic has always been there. My father is a magician. And when I say that, I mean like the show type of magician. I know how all of the tricks are done. My father used to build his own tricks, and I often helped him. I would go to the magic shop with him. My mother was his assistant. I know how the cut the lady in half trick is done because my dad had the box with the blades and all of that. And I'm not talking about that kind of magic. I always believed in the witch type of magic, which even at a young age, I made somewhat of a distinction. I understood that sleight of hand and illusions was one thing, but I always believed that there was some other powerful force out there that I was drawn to. And I've always been clairvoyant and always had odd experiences I could never explain. Even my parents picked up on this. My father kind of basically ignored it. My mother was a little wigged out by it, but it comes a lot from her side of the family. So it was strange. Now, going into how I came to connect with the Morrigan specifically. When I was young, I was still am, a voracious reader. I read just about everything. When I'm in the bathroom, I read the toilet paper packaging. I mean, I'm constantly reading something. I have to be reading something, and I read just about everything I can get my hands on. I read medical journals. I read, computer journals, computer magazines, books, romance novels, dramas, documentaries, things like that. I'm constantly reading something, and I'm usually reading 4 or 5 books at the same time, and it drives my mother crazy. Drives my husband crazy too. They don't understand how I can keep track of what's going on, but I also have a short attention span, so I'll put something down and kind of process it while I'm reading something else that's completely unrelated. When I was young, there was a book that I picked up in the library called The Hounds of the Morrigan by Pat O'Shea. Thick book. I read it within an hour. And I reread it, and I reread it again, and I loved this book. And for some reason, I was drawn to the villain in the story, who, by the way, is the Morrigan. She is seeking out a stone which contains the blood of a specific serpent so that she can regain her full power. It's actually her blood, but it's being guarded by this serpent. And if you're familiar with the legends of the Morrigan, that will make much more sense to you. But, it brings in all kinds of Celtic mythology and history into it that's beautifully interwoven, and it's quite well written. And even though it's geared to be a children's book, it's quite thick. I mean, it's well over 1,000 pages, and it's something that even an adult could enjoy reading because the plot is quite complex, and you get very wrapped up in the children because the two heroes of the story, it's a brother and sister, are children. But you see druids, and you see foxes, and you see the Morrigan and her triple aspect, and you see a trickery and the Dagda and all kinds of wonderful things. And this book just fascinated me. But I was fascinated by the Morrigan. Although she was the bad guy in the story, I didn't really see her as evil the way they were trying to portray her. And I felt kind of drawn to her, and I was almost sympathetic with her, and it was kind of weird. My mother always thought it was strange that I was drawn to that. But there were other things too that I had noticed. I was always very drawn to the black birds within our neighborhood. We call them purple martins. They're also known as grackles. We have the great grackle, the lower grackle, and purple martins. We have crows and ravens around here. You will see all of them. They're all corvids. So I would sit there and go out and try to talk to the birds. My mother said that when I was very little and we would visit my grandparents on vacation, because in my earlier years we lived in Colorado and we would drive to Texas to San Antonio to visit my grandparents. And my grandmother had a large birdhouse that looked like a train. And my mother said that I would sit in front of this birdhouse and go, Mr. Birdie, Mr. Birdie. Oh, he's not home. That's okay. He'll be home soon. He's gone to work. I don't remember having a lisp, but apparently I did, which is funny because I'm a speech pathologist now. But, she said I would go out and talk to the birds and that they would approach me. I've always loved animals, but birds in particular, and specifically blackbirds. And it just didn't really click. I love ravens. Edgar Allan Poe's poem, The Raven, is one of my favorites. Subtle little things. And as I started to get more and more into the craft, I started to study more and more about the mythology and about the gods and goddesses. And I've always studied world religions. Religion has always been something interesting to me. And so, finding that just one day it just sort of clicked for me. I just sort of went, oh, yeah. Because I was reading a story about somebody mentioned, in fact, I think it wasn't Stephanie Woodfield, although I think she mentioned it as well in her book that caught my attention, and it was The Hounds of the Morgan. And I was like, I have that book. I remember that book. And so I was able to find the book and go, yes, of course. And it just sort of seemed to open my eyes. It was kind of like, wow, there it is. And then, of course, there were people like Joey Morris, who was very connected to the Morgan and talked about her. And everything she said, I was like, yes, yes, yes. It clicked with me and it made sense. And one day I just went, yes, of course. She's always been there. I just didn't realize she'd always been there. So finding your deity is going to be a very personal experience to you. And it could be from you doing a lot of reading and studying and just finding what seems to call to you. If you have a predilection or an interest in something, there's a reason that interest is there. So take the time to explore that interest. You might be one of these lucky people that has some sort of a deep, oh my God, she spoke to me in a dream, or he came to me in a vision, and blah, 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 blah. And that may be your experience. But your experience may be a lot more subtle, such as mine was, where it just kind of all the pieces sort of click together one day and you go, ah, which is exactly how it was for me. So what are some ways that I now currently connect and stay connected to the Morrigan? Well, there's a lot of different ways, because I also feel very drawn to Cernunnos. I'd always been very drawn to deer and to the woods and to the nature of things and changing of the seasons and strong, powerful male masculine energy. My father and I, as much as I loved my father when I was very, very little, and it's not that I don't love my father now, but my father has always been kind of absent. He was always working. When I was very young, he was much more present. But as we got older, my father found it very hard to relate to my sister and I feel. He's always been closer to my sister, but me particularly, my family, they just don't understand me. I have no doubt that my family loves me in their own way, but they just don't get me. They never have. And I've always kind of wondered if I wasn't sort of mixed up at the hospital, because nobody seems to understand me and my family. And my father, particularly as I got older, he was just more and more distant emotionally. He was much more present when I was younger and just sort of drifted off, especially once we moved to Texas. It was as if you were putting paper into water and it sort of dissolved. We did a lot together as a family when I was very young. We did a lot less together as a family when I was older. Now, once a week, we would take my grandma, my father's mother, out to lunch. Or to dinner. But really, my dad had his own thing. He had his Masons, and he was very into that. And he was in the shrine and the Nemnuffs and doing the circus 1 week a year. And my mother had her mother, and so she was doing her thing. And it kind of left me adrift. And I think that if I had realized the connection with the Morrigan earlier, I might have been better off. But I've been through a lot. I had to go through the fire to emerge. And so, where was I going with that train of thought? The train of thought has left the station, folks. It's gone off the track. I was saying that I was always very kind of drawn to certain things. And so I use those things today to connect to the Morrigan and to Cernunnos. Oh, the masculine energy. That's where I was going with that. So Cernunnos has always interested me. I've always been drawn to the Baphomet too, which is strange. Well, not really strange, I guess, because the horned god has always been present, and it's a very Celtic thing as well. So today, some ways that I connect with my deities is by imagery. So I have like this little plaque with this image of Cernunnos that I made. And all I did was I went to Hobby Lobby and I got a little piece of wood. I took a picture that I liked of Cernunnos. This happens to be a particularly strong image where he's holding on to the snake in his hand, and he's got his horns, and he's very young and masculine looking, and it appealed to me, clearly. So I put this piece of paper onto this piece of wood, and I laminated it with some table laminator. You have to mix it, and then you brush it on, and it's shiny, and it's a little bubbly. It was the first time I'd ever done anything like this. But I keep this on his altar, and it is an image that I use sometimes on my altar in grand ritual. It just helps me when I talk to Cernunnos. I will use an image like this. Another image that I like are printed images, such as the one that I got from this beautiful card that Jen Hodgson sent me. Now, I love this card. I keep it on his altar also. I have taped it to the back of the wall. And again, you know, I will sit in front of my altars. I have them side by side, and I will talk physically to my deities. I will ask them for what I need. I will make my offerings, which we'll get into later. But this is an image that I can hold in my mind. And I'm a kind of a visual person. I'm sort of a holistic learner, but when it comes to people and places, I need pictures. I need things. I'm absolutely terrified that I'm going to end up with Alzheimer's and forget everyone. So pictures to me are very important. Another way that you can connect with your deity is by finding images that correspond to. This is an image of the Morrigan. I actually was going to put this onto some sort of an altar tile and laminate it much as I did this one, but I changed my mind. So I also thought of having this tattooed on my back, but I don't like tattoos, so I probably won't. But this is an image that I have seen in various places, and here's the funniest thing. I was walking through the store and saw it on a bottle of wine called Ravenswood wine, and by golly, I picked that wine up, and it became one of my favorites because it's a really good red wine. But having an image like this close to you, just somewhere around you, can help reconnect you in a time when you are feeling a little frustrated or weak. It gives you some way to remind you that the Lord and Lady are present in your life. Other ways are, for me, just little bits of nature. For me, I think of when I see a pine cone, I think of the woods. When I think of the woods, I think of Cernunnos and the Green Man. And so I can instantly reconnect by doing that. Candles and oils are great ways of connecting with your deity. Find one that reminds you, or make an oil that is in honor to your Lord or Lady, or both, and use things that correspond to them or that you feel in your heart belong to them in some way, and use that oil as a way to connect in meditation to them. Make your candles, make your soaps, and use those fragrances as a way to connect. For me, patchouli is very earthy. Earthy, once again, makes me think of the forest, makes me think of Cernunnos, and so I connect patchouli with Cernunnos and the god. It's also known for its aphrodisiac qualities, so I find it relates both, because the goddess Morrigan is a goddess of sex and sexuality and birth and death and that whole cycle of life. So having that connects the two of them for me, being that they are both Celtic in nature. Another way in which I connect to my Lord and Lady that other people may or may not use, and I plan to do some sort of an article or something to this, is through tarot or through oracle decks. And in my case, with the Morrigan, I use the Halloween oracle deck. I really find that the images in this really help me to connect to the goddess Morrigan. They just seem very Morrigan-esque in their imagery. And so when I am trying to connect with her, I will light some candles and I'll sit down and I will ask her a question directly and I will pull a card. I'll ask her to give me some sort of an image. And I love this one. This one's invisibility. And I like this one because she is a shape shifter, and invisibility is a method of shifting your shape to make yourself less noticeable to others. It doesn't mean that you physically turn invisible, just means that you blend your aura so that your energy is not as noticeable to others. And I find that that's very useful, and I find that it's one of the best things that I've gotten from her. So I really like the images on these cards, and I find that they feel very Morrigan-esque to me. And so I use these to connect to her in ways that maybe others do not. And I love this one here. Ancestors, see the DNA on the tree? I love, love, love it. So being that I find that these cards are, not only that, but also Samhain is her Sabbath. It's her time. So the fact that these are Halloween themed and rather, I hesitate to use the term dark, and I really hate it when people say she's a dark goddess, because I think that there is a dark and a light side to every deity out there, because once again, there's a dark and a light side to all of them, and I think they are all simply manifestations of one energy. But either way, they seem to be very Morrigan-esque in their feel, and she can be very fierce. She can be very dark. She can be very in your face. And I find that sometimes she is. And as she is the goddess of death, she is the Lady de los Muertos. So I really find that these cards in particular, more than any other deck I've seen, have helped me to connect with her. And I can open my mind to messages from her in ways that maybe are different than others. For me, it's a much more direct connection. So using an oracle deck or a tarot deck that I feel is very much in the nature of my Lord or Lady helps me to connect. And then, of course, I have my little bag that I made to hold them. So I sew these little bags for myself all the time. Love, love, love them. I enjoy sewing. It's creationary for me, and it's relaxing. So I plan to make myself a set of Sabbath robes for the winter, because although it's 180s here in the summer, in the winter the garage is rather chilly for Sabbath. So in any case, some of the ways that I also connect are through any form of scrying, candle scrying particularly. I like crystal scrying. It works very well for me to connect with her, and just some deep meditation are ways that I can connect very deeply with my God and Goddess. Another way that I connect with my God and Goddess is through dream state. I will use flying ointment before I go to bed, particularly when I'm wanting to be open to astral travel or to connecting with the Morrigan through my dream states. And I have found that she does communicate that way very well, probably because it's kind of betwixt. It's usually right before I actually fall into a deep sleep. It's when I'm kind of in that in-between state where I'm sort of conscious but not really conscious. I'm kind of going into sleep, but I'm not quite there yet. I find that those are the times in which I get my strongest messages from her, and so that really helps me to connect, especially if I have a lot on my mind and I'm not able to just sort of clear my mind for scrying. I can use a flying ointment before bed to help me meditate more deeply and connect with her. And what the heck is wrong with my stomach today? Jeez Louise. So those are just a few of the ways in which I connect directly with my deities. I know that there are probably a million other ways, and I'm sure you're going to get some great ideas, and I'm looking forward to seeing what everybody else has to say about this topic this week. I realize this has been kind of a lengthy, rambly video, but I hope that it has given you some new ideas in ways in which you can connect to your deity. And for those of you that don't feel you've connected to somebody yet, don't lose hope and don't feel like you have to have that all-powerful slap in the face, because it's not always that way. Sometimes it's more like finding little pieces and snapping a puzzle together. So take heart. Don't worry if you don't have a deity immediately. Like I said, for me, it's one female energy, one male energy, and they may call to you in a different way at a different time. So don't close your mind and think that it has to be just one way. Be open and allow them to communicate with you and allow it to come to you in the manner that's proper for you. So thank you once again. Hope you all have a wonderful week, and blessed be.